everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Thunderstruck. It's been a while, but Lightning Hockey is back. Oh man, Michael, it feels so good to say that once again. We're ready to go for another hockey season. Super excited about it, and ready to go to get things underway and start talking about some Lightning hockey. It's been too long. How you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm Michael Wax. He's Jake Ricker. I know it's been too long, but we got to introduce ourselves, man. And I am so happy with the fact that the season is just around the corner. And hopefully the Lightning are ready to respond after the last couple of years have been a little disappointing in the postseason.
Yeah, those first round exits have not been too what's the word I'm looking at? They've been disappointing, to be honest with you. After we know that this team is very talented, all the talent they have, Kucherov in the season he had last year couldn't get it going in the postseason. And if you heard some of the comments from the Lightning during media day, the theme was that they were not happy with the way the last couple of years have gone, and they want to really step up and get back to where they were just a couple of years ago when they were winning Stanley Cups. So that's the big excitement going into this season. And listen, at the end of the day, Michael, words are words. You have to put it to pen to paper in order to really prove it here. But for me, I at least, it's just nice to hear those things that clearly they do care and they do understand that these last couple of years have not been successes.
Yeah, and I think Vasilevsky in particular can't repeat a lot of the things he said, but his message was basically we need to perform better at home in the playoffs in front of our fans. They deserve better than this. And we're talking about the season preview and the playoffs unfortunately aren't until April. But I think that they're going to have a very similar outlook on how they perform in just overall this season. And maybe they're gunning for the President's Trophy. Maybe it's about, maintaining some semblance of health as they go into the playoffs. But this is a team that has really coasted for the most part, I would say, over the past couple of years. Just being like, okay, let's win and as much as we can get into the playoffs and we'll see what happens. But as we've seen over the last 3 years, that doesn't really work anymore. There needs to be a new strategy. And I think John Cooper and, the new assistant coaches with the fact that Jeff Blashill is now in Chicago as their head coach. They can speak to a new way of doing things.
I'm really looking forward to it. And the preseason has been a great indication of what we hopefully will see into the regular season. Now, I will say this, the preseason does not mean everything. We've seen what can happen where guys have very great preseasons or very bad preseasons and then do the opposite in the regular season. But this is what we got to go off right now. And a lot of guys, Michael, really stepped up. It felt like in the preseason, the Lightning go 6-1 in their preseason games. That in itself is very impressive. That's not really easy to do. You don't always have your top lineups in there every single day. It's a lot of young guys. And there were a lot of young players that really did impress us, Michael, in these first few preseason games here to get closer to the season.
Yeah, there were a lot of really talented guys that most of them didn't end up making the roster, which is actually, I think, a good thing. And it shows that the Lightning actually have a little bit of depth in their system with the guys that can compete against NHL talent. Woj, which I don't even know how to pronounce that guy's name. And we're just going to call him Woj, but him. Dominic James, who was on the roster, was signed like a week before the preseason started and was on the roster until the last preseason game ended. He played 27 minutes in that last preseason game. Now,
Well,
that was due to extenuating circumstances, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
yes.
Ethan Zada is another guy that I thought really impressed in the time that he was in the preseason. It wasn't very long compared to the other players, and he has since gone on to score 6 goals in 5 games since he's gone down to the OHL. But all of those young guys have really impressed, and I think there was a really good battle between a lot of players that were looking to cement themselves on the roster. The record is what the record is. 6-1 is nice when you think about it. Jacob Peltier was another guy that I forgot to mention. He didn't even end up cracking the Lightning's opening night roster, but that's another guy that they call up at any time, and it looks like he can produce. And I am just happy to see that the Lightning are, at least in the preseason, back to their winning ways.
John Cooper said that he thought this was one of the best preseason groups the Lightning have had in a while when it comes to the prospects, which is a big deal because the Lightning, as we know, do not have a deep prospect system because they don't have their first round picks. They've traded them for those big star players to help them win Stanley Cups, which we've noted on this show before was very successful, and we would do it 10 out of 10 times again because we saw the results that they got. But for these guys to come out and be impressive as they were when the Lightning don't have all those top picks is a really great sign. I think there's a shorter list of who wasn't impressive than there was of who was impressive. There were so many guys that really did stand out. You named a bunch of them. I believe I'm saying his name right, but another guy for me, Aberzizis,
Mhm.
he was really good as well. I liked his game. Dominic James, as you mentioned, was fantastic. Just great hockey all around. Those guys were really flying up and down the ice. They were getting some puck luck, good offense. They were playing some decent defense as well. The biggest negative that I had was the penalties. They took a lot of penalties, which sometimes can happen in the preseason. Even the refs are getting used to things and getting back to it's their preseason as well. But there were a little bit too many penalties for my liking. But if that's the only negative, this is a great preseason.
Well, and how many of those penalties, and I bet the number is still higher than you would like, but how many of those penalties when you take out that last game were there? You're looking at
Well,
a couple of minor penalties a game
yes.
versus what did the Panthers have 17 power plays
Too
in
many,
that
too
final
many,
game?
too many
It was ridiculous. It was a carnival. It was a clown show. Like that last preseason game was just absolutely crazy. But again, I get what you're saying. Like there were games where you would like them to stay outside of the penalty box. They had a couple of second periods that weren't fantastic. I think that's something that has carried over from previous years where you notice the second period, specifically on the road with that long change, they just get stuck out there and they allow their opponents to kind of do whatever they want. But hopefully that is not a problem going into the regular season. I know there were a couple of games like that in the preseason, but again, you don't have your entire roster in the preseason. So I guess we'll see how that goes. That is something that as the defense sort of gets back to the way it was pre-Jeff Blashill, they kind of fix those mistakes.
Well, you mentioned the roster, Michael. Let's talk about that roster. Here it is for the Lightning. They have released their opening roster for this season. Here's a couple of big notes. It's most of the guys you're going to expect. Obviously, there were not many roster spots up for grabs when it comes to the Lightning. There were one or two, though, with Nick Paul, who is on long term injured reserve. We knew that before the preseason started. Nico Huntington, he is also injured right now and it is technically on the roster. And Zemis Gergensons is on IR, which we knew that he was banged up a little bit. A little surprised to see him on IR, but he is also hurt. The big difference is on this roster. Gage Gonzalez, he is on the opening night roster. Jack Finley, he has made the roster as well. Defensively, you do have Max Crozier. He will be on the roster. He was up and down a little bit last year. And then here's the weirdest part, Michael, goalies. The Lightning are carrying, of course, Andrei Vasilevsky and Jonas Johansson, but they also will have a third goaltender to at least start the season in Phoenix Copley. Uh, that is not normal to have three goaltenders. It's very rare for an NHL team to do it in general, especially the Lightning when you have a guy like Andrei Vasilevsky. And nobody really knows quite yet, I think, why the Lightning are doing this. There's a couple people that are speculating on this. So, Michael, I'll get your opinion before I give mine. But what are your thoughts on this roster in general and the three goaltender situation? Because it is one to keep your eye on right now.
I don't know what to think of it. I
I
really
know.
don't. Like this has never happened for the Lightning. That I think the only time they carried three goalies on the roster was when they had that overseas game in Sweden back in back
That's
in
right.
2020. And of course they're in the bubble as well, but like this is a very weird circumstance. We did hear a lot about how, where is Andrei Vasilevsky? He showed up for media day and then didn't show up for the preseason, and then he's in that final preseason game and he ended up getting pulled through two periods and Copley ends up going in for that last period. I have no idea what to expect. So I'm concerned is not the right word, perplexed for sure.
Yeah, I understand that because it is weird. Now, I will say this: I know a lot of people were concerned about Andrei Vasilevsky, and understandably so. We saw what happened to him when he ultimately had to have back surgery and was out for so long, and how that affected him. I have never been concerned because, thankfully we have such a great organization that I've come to very easily trust them, which may be a bad thing, but Cooper has always maintained that he was going to be out for a little bit. He was going to be back at practice, which he was, and he was going to be ready for opening night. And he was in that last preseason game. It's very rare to see a goaltender play a full 60 minutes in a preseason game anyway. So I'm not concerned about Andre Vasilevsky. I do wonder, are they going to hold him back this year for real? Considering they have
Good.
goaltenders on the roster, they've always talked about. Vasilevsky's even said it. We need to manage my time better, and I forget what word he used um, specifically about you know keeping Vasilevsky. I don't want to say in check, but just not playing 60 games a
Hmm.
year. So that's what I wonder if this was about. When the Lightning claimed Copley off waivers, everybody immediately assumed Vasilevsky was going to be out for an extended period of time. But JBB said that this was to help the goaltender depth. And I still think that's true, especially for the minors, because Lightning do not have a lot of goaltenders on their roster in general. So I think that's true. They'd have to send him back through waivers, though, to get down to the minors. So my belief is, and again, this is purely speculation, that they're going to use Copley and Johansson and Vasilevsky's kind of all three. Copley may play one, maybe 2 games, give him a shot a little bit, see what he can do. And while Vasilevsky gets back to a true 100%, because I think he is healthy, but obviously he hasn't played, he'll play in one preseason game, so it might take him a little bit of time. And then they will eventually send him through waivers to hopefully round out that minor league goaltender depth. That is my belief. It's definitely weird, though. We've never seen something like this before.
Yeah, I'm again kind of wondering what the plan is. You mentioned the goaltender depth. Basically, in the minor leagues, it's Brendan Halverson, Ryan Fanti, and Harrison Menigan. Like, none of those guys have NHL experience, and none of them really have AHL experience either. Like, if you're going to make one of them your number three, that's a bit of a concern. So I sort of get why they claimed him. It's more a puzzling of like, why is he on the opening night roster? Why was he
Right.
not on waivers?
That's
Um,
more the surprise.
yeah, and between Vasilevsky and also Victor Hedman, who was also dealing with the injury during the preseason, like that is a little bit of a concern. They did decide to carry only 7 defensemen on their opening night roster, so maybe they don't see it as much of a concern. But again, he's 34 already, and he's starting that first year of a 4-year deal. Making sure your captain is 100% as the season goes along is a big thing. And then the big thing, or the name that surprised me, I guess, the most was today. Curtis Douglas was uh,
That's right.
was taken off of waivers from Utah. For anybody who doesn't know, he is 6'9", and I believe it is over 240 pounds. And if you saw the Florida preseason game, that final preseason game, you know exactly why they claimed him. So very, very interesting. Those three names in particular.
For those that might have missed it too, the Lightning and Panthers the last couple of Lightning Panthers games, the Battle of Florida, after that first game that everybody got so excited about in the postseason, ever since then, I think they've been a little more calmer and not as exciting. They're back.
Hmm.
These two
Yep.
teams do not like each other. There were tons of penalty minutes, tons of fights, lots of anger stemming back to last year's postseason matchup. So the Battle of Florida is clearly back, and it would not surprise me. The Lightning are claiming some players here just to have a little more of physicality and some grit to their lineup, which they've said before that's something that they needed to help them out. That's why they went out and got guys like Pat Maroon that helped them win here. So I'm not surprised at that pickup. We'll see what kind of role he plays heading into the season. But Michael, let's talk about the outlook on this season here for the Lightning. We mentioned that the players obviously want to get past the first round. I want to ask you this: what is your goal for the Lightning this year? We always talk about that. What constitutes a successful season for the Lightning? Obviously, this team's expected to make the playoffs. I don't think there's any question about that. They've got the talent. This roster has been like pretty much the same for the last couple of years. For me, obviously, you have to make the playoffs. I think they have to get past the first round. I'm going to go a step further, though. I'd like to see this team get back to the conference finals at the very least to have a successful season. Maybe a little bit of a high bar. That's obviously very tough to do, but this team's got the talent. We know they can do it. We've seen them do it before. And I think if they really do have that chip on their shoulder, like they said, they can do it.
Normally the ultra positive person you are, would say that they're going to win the cup. So I guess they're taking a step back in your eyes. They're just go to the conference finals.
Well, I'm trying to be a little more realistic, okay? It's one of my resolutions.
So I guess my thing is twofold. Basically, what I want to see from the team, and then what I want to see from a certain player, which I guess that we can get into our breakout players after that. But for the team, I would love to see another conference finals appearance for the Lightning. Their big thing is going to be, can we get past the Panthers? And the Panthers are without Matthew Tkachuk until probably the new year. They're without Alexander Barkov for probably the entire season. But that seems to be your new boogeyman because you lost to them in 5 games, both the last 2 years. And while those series were close in some ways, they really weren't in others. And it seems like if you can sort of drag them into the depths of what they're trying to drag you into basically their game, and can you respond to that? So for me, it would be in those first 2 rounds, you are going to play Florida at some point, most likely. Can you get past the Panthers? The other thing is depth scoring, which something that you shouldn't rely on necessarily because you have Kucherov, Gensel, Point, Hagel, Sorelli all having basically career years last year, aside from Kucherov, who one season put up 140 points or something crazy like that. But you had Mitchell Chafee, who had 12 goals last year. You had Gage Gonsalves, who in his second stint with the Lightning after his AHL demotion had half a point a game in like 35 games, which is actually great when you think about it. He had a playoff goal. Connor Geeky had a big time playoff assist in that fifth game. Nick Paul had a goal in the playoffs, or a couple goals in the playoffs as well. Like those are the types of guys that you are going to need to step up to go along with your superstars because unfortunately, as we've seen, some of the superstars kind of disappear in the playoffs.
It does happen sometimes, and some of that is the credit to the opposing team that they're doing a good
Yep.
job of taking away those players. But you're right, and you're going to need that depth pieces. So the other teams have to say, "Oh shoot, we need to worry about those guys too," and that's when your superstars can kind of slip away and start making plays again. I'm glad you mentioned some of those guys because let's talk about our breakout players for this year, who we hope to see and that can really help the Lighting this year. Michael, I have a suspicion that we might have the same person here because the guy that I'm looking to is a guy who played with us last year. He ended up getting sent down, but clearly has a lot of talent. He was brought in for this organization to be a star player. And for me, that's Connor Geeky. I think that he's got a lot of potential. He's shown it. He scored an unbelievable goal in the preseason where he totally broke Seth Jones's ankles and made a beautiful shot to score a goal. He celebrated like it was a Stanley Cup, which I thought was kind of funny. But listen,
When you're fighting for a roster spot, you gotta.
yeah, and that's very fair. We saw Geeky make his statement when he did a fight against one of the Panthers players last year, so he's known to kind of do that. But for Geeky had a good preseason, but he's got to find that consistency. He did not have that consistency last year, so he's a guy that I really hope steps up and solidifies himself as a mainstay in this roster. We'll see what the plan is for him, but I'm hopeful.
It's interesting the way that you said we probably had the same player, and then you kind of listed off what it was. I did think we had the same player because Gage and Solvis went through the exact same thing last year, where he was on that opening night roster. He was on the roster really early in the season. He really struggled to garner points. He had a couple of good games, but other than that, he was having a lot of trouble. Got sent to the AHL, had a really good, couple weeks, and then as I mentioned, came up for those final 30 oddish games and put up half a point a game. So I'm looking for him to continue that. I think that when you look at his production and how it helped the Lightning, I have it written in my prospect pyramid when I talk about why he's a graduate. He had a 0.53 points per game average in 34 regular season games following his call up, and he had the Lightning at a 21, 8, and 5 record, which is really good. Not to say that he was the catalyst for everything, but when you get that type of scoring, it helps. It really does. And so, I think that when it comes to a breakout player, he can become that next, hopefully maybe not as high as Brandon Hagel, but that same sort of guy where he is ready to be put into any situation. He had a couple of dynamite games at the end of last season and in the playoffs. Like he had a 2 assist game against Florida twice, and then he had a goal against Florida in that final game. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's got.
Not only is this season exciting for the Lightning because hockey is back and we have a pretty good outlook on this team for this year, but Michael, also some big events in this NHL
Yep.
season. Of course, we have the Olympics that'll be coming up here. We'll have, I think it's about a week and a half break. So there'll be a decent amount of time off. I'll pull it up here in just a second. I have this scheduled to my right here. But also we have the outdoor game for the Lightning this year, which I cannot wait for. I'm so excited. We as Lightning fans have been begging for an outdoor game here in Tampa. We are getting it against the Boston Bruins. It's on Gasparilla weekend. By the way, the logo for this outdoor game, 10 out of 10. They did a fantastic job. They cannot mess this up. They cannot mess this up, Michael. The jerseys have to be Gasparilla themed. The pirate ship needs to be shooting cannons when we score goals. I am so excited for this game. We'll be here to cover it when we get more details on everything. We a couple years ago when the Lightning played in Nashville, we did an article on everything you need to know about the outdoor game. We'll be doing that and more when we get those details out soon. But two big events, Michael, that I'm very excited to watch for the Lightning players and just for this fan base in general.
That will be one of the craziest weekends, maybe the craziest weekend in Tampa history. Either that or when they hosted the All-Star game on the same day as Gasparilla,
Yeah.
which that was also wild. But I'm really looking forward to that. I'm curious on what the Olympic situation is going to look like. I bet that we're going to have a lot of guys that are going to the Olympics, but like, you know, what does extra games do for some of the guys, when they come back? Do they decide to rest a little bit? Where are they in the standings? What do they potentially need at the trade deadline? Like that is a very interesting like question laden period for the Lightning in that entire month of February leading up to the trade deadline. So I'm excited for the Olympics too. This is the first time that basically the first time in their dynasty that they're going to have this big break in the middle of the season. So I'm interested to see how they deal with it.
Yeah, and we did see with the Four Nations tournament that it felt like a lot of those guys
True.
that went to those tournaments played even a little bit better since they had come back. And we know how exciting that was. Will the Olympics be the same? I'm not sure. It is about a week and a half break again. So and the Lightning tend to not do great with extended periods of time off, but only time will tell. At the end of the day, as long I'm excited for the Olympics, just as a hockey fan, I think they're going to be a lot of fun, especially after the success we saw in the Four Nations tournament. But again, the biggest concern will be just stay healthy. We want you to
Yep.
have fun and play hard and have some good hockey, but also please stay healthy. So I'm looking forward to it. We'll see how things turn out for them at the end here, but two big events for the Lightning this year. There's a lot to look forward to. This should be a really fun season, Michael. I can't wait to cover it all and be talking more about it throughout the season. Any other big points you want to hit home here on our season preview?
Just make the playoffs and just see what happens.
Right? You get a ticket to the dance and you never know what could happen. That is as the saying goes. So lots to look forward to. Don't forget, follow us on social media at @BuiltReport_TB on Twitter, also on Instagram as well. We're going to have a lot of new and exciting coverage coming your way. Tons of more shows. We'll be doing more articles, hopefully going to more games as credentialed media too, which will be a lot of fun. All this to say, there's a lot to look forward to, so be sure to give us a follow for all your Lightning coverage this season. Again, my name is Jake Rickle. Jake, preseason still, Michael. My name is Jake Ricker. This is Michael Wax. We're looking forward to joining you guys here for this Lightning season. But with that said, we'll see you in the next one. Go Bolts.